how far back does this go? Is it just so entrenched and tied to the Liberal government?
I would say, in my own view, absolutely.
Tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. Welcome back to Muslim Loose. My name's David. When I initially started making these videos here, I was talking a lot about China and their influence in our real estate market, specifically in Vancouver, as I lived there for 13 years. And I've been slowly putting together all these pieces. I knew a lot because I used to have a notary office with my ex-wife, who's also Chinese. And what we have here today is Sam Cooper, investigative journalist, who dropped all the bombshell news about the traders in Canada, naming 4 of them. We've got some clips from a podcast here he does with Daniela Cambone on the ITM Trading YouTube channel. And his insights really connect a lot of these dots. What Sam's talking about here in this podcast, I think, is the real reason why Donald Trump is putting these tariffs on Canada and Mexico. Let's jump into this. So this is coming from this podcast here, ITM Trading. I'm going to show just a few clips, but I'll link up this full video at the end.
And this was hard for people to believe, but Vancouver has become a production hub for China and a transshipment hub for fentanyl precursors, to the point where it's now established that Canada is a fentanyl exporter nation. And so this gets to what Donald Trump is saying. It's hard for many people to believe that, Canada could be put in the same category as Mexico in terms of endangering the United States with fentanyl, with illegal immigration and human trafficking. But my research has shown that, indeed, this is the fear and concern of U.S. intelligence community, U.S. military and law enforcement, really for decades, that Canada's weak enforcement against transnational crime, weak control of borders, has allowed international organized crime with linkages to hostile states, most specifically China.
Something to note, Justin Trudeau keeps relying on the 1% of the street fentanyl fact. That's just a statistic they have. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the true facts. It might be 20%, it might be 4%, it might be 87% of all the street fentanyl comes from Canada, and we just don't know about it, versus Mexico. Like, this is a comparison that 99% comes from Mexico and only 1% from Canada. But this is just the numbers they know about. And since David Eby is not doing anything about this in British Columbia, and that's where most of this is happening, we don't really know the numbers. But as we know here from the reporting that Sam Cooper has done, we know that Vancouver is a hub for this stuff, and that's where all the real estate money comes from. The dirty real estate money coming from China comes over, cleans it out, buys up our real estate, and that's why the prices got jacked starting back about 15 years ago.
Do say that there's very deep concerns that Canada is being used by China in a very sophisticated economic and really criminal way. I do think that's correct.
Wow. Well, you have just dropped a massive truth bomb.
From what I showed you a couple days ago with Justice Hogue and her links to the Trudeau family and the law firms and those links to China, are those linked to China too? Is the whole thing interconnected? Is there no connection at all? We already know there's connections from the Trudeau Liberals, Han Dong, going to the People's Republic of China, United Front, the group directly linked. Is all of this an intertwined web?
And I discovered that massive inflows of funds, mysterious money, mostly from China and Hong Kong, had about a 30% influence each year on Vancouver's real estate market. And this was strange because, as you know, as everyone knows, China has communist capital control. So this was illegitimate money at scale into Vancouver homes, just causing prices to skyrocket. And to cut to the chase, I discovered that Canadian regulated casinos, first and foremost, currency shops, and real estate development were being used at scale for Chinese money launderers. It's called the Vancouver model of money laundering. Eventually, I learned that Chinese state-sponsored, so we're talking about Chinese intelligence, Chinese military, was directly involved with these underground Chinese criminal networks that were facilitating this massive money laundering, which tied into fentanyl, cocaine, money moving around the world.
I used to have a notary office with my ex who's Chinese, and we would see businessmen come over for a weekend and buy 2, 3, 4 houses. Sometimes they would send someone with power of attorney to buy houses for them, and not like $200,000 houses. They're buying $5 million houses, like 6, 7 of them. Like, not even the guy who's buying them. They send someone to buy those houses for them over a weekend. They come back, they're like, "Yep, boss, I bought 6, 7, 8 houses." And the government did not crack down. They're flushing their dirty, crime-ridden money from China over to Canada to to flush it, to clean it. And how they do it is they send it over from mainland China to Macau, which is the gambling capital of China. Macau is a different kind of territory. It's part of China, but it's not mainland China. It's not a part of China per se. It's China controlled. And so they have different laws because there's no gambling allowed in China. But Macau, they do allow gambling. If you go to Macau, all the casinos there are like replicas of what you would see in Vegas. And so Chinese businessmen would then take their money. They would buy, say, for example, $1 million of casino chips, and they would get like a package from the casino. So they would get a week free of stay and $1 million. And then they would go gamble some of that money and say, just for example, that they didn't lose any money. They won some money. They went up 1.2 million. They lost some money, went down to 900,000. Maybe they won a bit more, and they ended up with $1 million, just as they initially put their investment in for the casino chips. They would then trade in those casino chips for USD. So now they've moved their Chinese money, their RMB, out into USD or CAD. Initially, I believe it was more into USD, but then they found it was easier to launder the money in Canada. They started doing it CAD. They put that through a bank like HSBC, Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation, and there's a branch in Port Coquitlam, just in kind of greater Vancouver there, and they would put that money in Hong Kong, go over to Port Coquitlam, take that money out, buy a bunch of houses. This is their way of getting their money out of China, as there's a limit of 50,000 US dollars per year that a Chinese citizen can take out of China, which is about 20,000 RMB. So then as what he uncovered is then they're taking that money, they're using it for their street fennel and the street candy ring, and then they would flush that money again through Canadian casinos.
As you know, the fentanyl precursors themselves are often not illegal, so China ships the precursors into the west coast of Mexico and the west coast of Canada, because we know that U.S. law enforcement is going to have a much stronger control on the American west coast. And so Vancouver is used for those precursor hubs, the precursors to come in. They're printed up in pill presses and super labs, they call them, factories in British Columbia, and shipped around the world. And the money collected from those sales, this is where these massive piles of warehouse drug cash, they're collected in Vancouver. Ultra wealthy businessmen, Chinese Communist Party officials, they call them whale gamblers, gangsters, fly into Vancouver. They take this drug cash, walk into casinos, the money is laundered, and it goes back to these Chinese factories, and the precursors come in again. That's the Vancouver model, and it works with the Mexican cartels as well.
So there's no doubt that the Americans know about this. It just seems for Trump, this is probably the reason he's pointing at. They should just come out and really paint a very clear picture of what they don't like and clean it up. They're kind of just pushed it over to Trudeau and the Liberals say clean it up, but of course Justin Trudeau and the Liberals are using this as a wedge point to try to gain support for their party. So they're not going to do what's in Canadians' best interests once again. So check out this. They bring this up here. It says politicians and business elite, including former ambassador to Canada, Dominic Barton, facilitated and helped the criminal enterprises get a secure hold in the West. Do you all remember this guy's name, Dominic Barton? The guy who said he doesn't know Justin Trudeau. He's not friends with him. No, he's never heard of him. He doesn't know who that guy is.
I'm not a close personal friend of the Prime Minister.
Would you say he's one of your 5 best friends?
No.
One of your 10 best friends?
No.
One of your 25 best friends?
No.
One of your 50 best friends?
No.
Do you have his personal phone number?
I do not.
I barely even know the guy. That's how you might sum up what Dominic Barton said of his relationship with the Prime Minister. A former global managing director at McKinsey & Company, Barton under pressure at the Government Operations Committee to explain his relationship with the federal government and if he had any role in the increase in McKinsey contracts since the PM took power. But Barton was emphatic. Those contracts are nothing to do with him, and Canadian government work made up such a small fraction of McKinsey's overall business that Barton says he doesn't think it would have made sense for them to try any funny business.
Most consulting firms were extremely busy. They didn't have enough people to be able to do the work. That's again, you should ask others that come in here to talk about it. I haven't been working there, but that was my sense of it. So there was a very significant increase in the market, in the size of the consulting market.
Barton underlined he was out of McKinsey by 2018 and had fully sold off his stock the same year. Barton chaired Canada's Advisory Council on Economic Growth from 2017 onwards, what he says was the primary basis of his relationship with Justin Trudeau and cabinet. Barton.
So this guy spent like 20 years in China, direct links to Trudeau. You got Sam Cooper calling him out, pointing directly to him. You'll see here, he talks more about Dominic Barton.
Was clear. He didn't handle government contracts when he was at McKinsey, and when he worked for the council, he never suggested McKinsey to anybody. But questioning soon pivoted to the ethics of McKinsey's other work, including its role in the opioid crisis. Barton says he had no knowledge of the pharma side of operations.
Are you really telling this committee that on a file that literally dozens of senior partners were working on, that you as a managing partner had no idea about such a prominent and potentially controversial client that the firm had for 15 years?
I've explained before, there are 3,000 client engagements that are going on at any particular given time.
But Liberal MPs underlined Barton was appearing as a private citizen who had not worked for McKinsey for years. And
oh, geez, so much corruption here. So like $220 million of contracts the Liberals gave to McKinsey. I don't know Justin Trudeau. I don't know him at all.
Couldn't be held to account for what his former employer did.
Well, when I name a person like Dominic Barton, his involvement with McKinsey and sort of
Right.
their ties to the opioid trade are different than the underground Chinese fentanyl I'm talking about. But I would say that Mr. Barton are involved in direct dealings with Chinese state-owned enterprises, are under the table, you know, I say, involved in Chinese intelligence influence operations.
Did you ever hear from Dominic Barton?
No, I tried to question Mr. Barton when he was called to testify in Canada's, it's called the Canada-China Committee. This is a few years ago.
This is amazing. So he tried to get some questions in on that moment.
I was one of the reporters that sat down and watched as a conservative politician named Garnet Genuis asked, would Mr. Barton disclose what his or McKinsey's relationship was with these state-owned enterprises in China, and we've never had the answer. So when I point to people like the Desmarais family in Montreal and their power corporation, which is, according to intelligence, involved in dealings with Chinese state-owned enterprises, I have not heard back from people like Desmarais or Mr. Barton.
Sam Cooper just mentioned the Desmarais family, and going back to Andrew Haynes' post here about Justice Hogue and this whole connection with Justin Trudeau and Pierre Elliott Trudeau, Jean Chrétien. If we scroll down, this one here, the Desmarais Power Corp, trained at Justice Hogue's firm, Heaney Blakey, as an article student, trainee lawyer in the same Montreal office as Justice Hogue. Oliver Desmarais is now the chair of the Canada-China Business Council. Ugh, too many slippery connections going on here.
People at the level of Mr. George Soros have been targeted in these sort of elite trade influence operations, or do they know that they're being targeted for influence in China's trade? And so I think that sort of question would extend to Mr. Mark Carney, who's now running for the Liberal leadership as well.
Because, you know, the Desmarais family ties to Paul Martin. How far back does this go? Is it just so entrenched and tied to the Liberal government?
I would say, in my own view, absolutely. And I'll cite you a former high-level RCMP investigator named Gary Clement. He has written op-eds for my entity, the Bureau.news. They say that Power Corporation and Jean Chrétien have direct dealings with entities such as Cpac, which is a major global investment vehicle for Chinese princelings. That's the clans that run China. As the U.S. military says, Cpac is involved in Chinese military operations. So Mr. Chrétien, Power Corporation, and the Desmarais, whether wittingly or not, are involved in business relationships that Canadian intelligence, U.S. intelligence, and the U.S. military has concerns with. I believe this circles back to what President Trump is concerned with in Canada in Panama and other nations.
Speaking of Panama, we got this one from Benny Johnson. It says, breaking: Panama's president has ended the country's Panama Canal deal with China immediately following a meeting with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Are we tired of winning yet? This is pretty crazy. Then again, since the U.S. built the Panama Canal, it doesn't make sense that China would be the one running the show down there. So another win for America. Hopefully we can get rid of Trudeau here soon and we can get nice relations back between Canadians and Americans. I really don't like seeing stuff like this. We got this one shared originally by Willie Liu. This says, the Raptors game tonight, Canadians booing the American national anthem. I understand why people are booing. It's just sad. Like, we need to be grouping up together. There's already enough bad stuff going around with Russia and China and Iran and everything else. We need to be united here on North America. This also happened in Rogers Arena in Vancouver. That's what I was saying the other day, like, the tariffs are one thing. Sadly, it's creating a massive divide between our people. Not only Americans and Canadians, but among Canadians. There's so much turmoil, and this is exactly what Justin Trudeau and the Liberals want. They want to divide us. We need to stick together against the Trudeau Liberals. We need to get rid of these people out of our government. They have been doing this for 9, almost 10 years, trying to divide Canadians by all sorts of aspects they can. Enough is enough. With that said, we got Donald Trump here today coming out. He is not happy about Trudeau's announcement of counter tariffs. He's already put a clause in there saying he's going to increase the tariffs. Will he increase it to 35, 45, 50%? Will it just be sliding up 5% every week, every month going forward? Who knows?
Are you planning to increase the tariffs against Canada? Well, it could happen. If they do anything, we will. Canada's been very abusive of the United States for many years. They don't allow our banks. Did you know that? Canada does not allow banks to go in. If you think of,
I did my road trip across America. They have so many banks down there, all sorts of weird banks, like Key Bank, like that's the name of a bank. There's like American Eagle, whatever bank. Like there's just anyone who wants to start up a bank can start up one. It's so weird. They have funny logos. They're all over the place. It's so different compared to what we have here with all the big players. Most of them completely ripping off Canadians, like RBC, Scotiabank. They're just the worst. If you're not familiar, you should definitely be using EQ Bank or Wealthsimple. You'll get way better returns on your money. Even your money sitting in your account, you'll get much better interest rates.
About it, that's pretty amazing. If we have a U.S. bank, they don't allow them to go in. Canada's been very tough on oil, on energy. They don't allow our farm products in, essentially. They don't allow a lot of things in.
The farm products is because they have very lax regulations in America. They're using horrible chemicals that are terrible. The EU bans so many of those products. The EU doesn't allow their products either. So America needs to clean up their food system. And by all means, let's mingle that some more. As for the banks, let's open the doors. Let more competition in. I'm all for having any of the weird American banks, all the American banks, whatever, have them come up here. They can all compete for Canadians' business, and we can have better rates and better prices and better interest rates on everything.
And we allow everything to come in. It's been a one-way street. We subsidize Canada by the tune of about $200 billion a year. And for what? What do we get out of it? We don't get anything out of it. I love the people of Canada. I disagree with the leadership of Canada. And something's going to happen there. But if they want...
Something's going to happen there regarding Justin Trudeau, the leadership. This is very much a vendetta. He wants to get back at Trudeau. This is interesting, too, because he's mentioning the farm products, the banks. He's not even talking about 51st State or the street fennel anymore. It's just something different this time. So I don't know if there's really any way to appease him. I think we're just going to have to take this on the chin until we can get rid of Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, Mark Carney, whoever. Get Pierre Poilievre in there, and I bet this will switch around pretty quick.
Want to play the game? I don't mind. We can play the game all they want. Mexico, we've had very good talks with them, and this is retaliatory. This is retaliatory to a certain extent. Millions of people flowed into our country through Mexico and Canada, and we're not going to allow that.
That's interesting. He said they've had good talks with Mexico. So Trump doesn't have any vendetta with anyone in Mexico, the Mexican leader or former leader or whatever. He's just doing what's best for America. Sadly, we have Justin Trudeau who doesn't do that for us. He's quite literally done the opposite for 9 years. This is what I interpret. Trump wants Trudeau to call an election now so he can make a deal, ideally with Poilievre, and make sure the CCP doesn't interfere in our elections. He wants Poilievre to open Canada to U.S. companies to broaden their market as well as ours. Competition since Canada doesn't have any. Rid the government of global ties, crack down on the street candy smuggling, secure the borders, stop letting in so-called refugees getting $82,000 a year for free from terror lord countries. I believe him when he says he loves Canadian people, as his wife lived here for a long time. I don't see anything wrong with what he's trying to do. Pierre has no issues agreeing with this. If he's a real conservative, he should put Canada under U.S. currency with Trump backing. This may be the plan. If you read Pierre's book, he's been a conservative since he was born. Like, the man is a conservative. He's a patriot. He's all about Canada and doing what's best for Canadians. So I don't like when I see people questioning him, not necessarily this post, but I've seen a bunch of other ones, people questioning Pierre. We're lucky to have Pierre Poilievre. We just need to get him in power.
I stress that the photographs of Mr. Trudeau with individuals that are documented officials, essentially, in China's foreign influence arm, which is the United Front, they're difficult to explain away. And I do think I have some inkling of feeling that the US government is also concerned with those types of funding relationships. Mr. Trudeau has, even a US congressional report in 2023 now points to concerns of a major donation to Mr. Trudeau's foundation that reportedly came, a United Front official that was tasked by Beijing. Very suspicious.
At this point, we're just saturated with the Justin Trudeau corruption scandals. This is just sad here. So we got Sam talking about how he receives threats from people because of the investigative journalism he's doing.
You know, to be honest, Daniela, it hurts me to say it, but it's made my opinion of Canada's goodness as a state change since I received those warnings. It's made me think that, like a lot of Canadians that have the capacity, do I need to think about getting closer to being involved in American business? Do I need to run my business from Canada if I'm not protected here?
I guess that's what it comes down to. That's what Donald Trump's talking about. Too much crime and corruption in Canada. And the numbers we have, I don't think they're honest. I don't think they have proper numbers of how much street fentanyl, how much crimes. We do have some numbers of what's going on here, which are appalling. We'll get to next. But Sam Cooper is a real gem here in Canada. Like, he is one of the rare ones. The stuff he's getting into and exposing, it puts him at risk, and to a much lesser extent to the creators here on YouTube like myself. I've had people show up at my house. I've had people threaten to sue me. I've had people send all sorts of nasty threats to my email. Right now, Canada, there's a lot of clashing. We need to come together. Listen to this about him talking about Panama now.
People that are very high level in Hong Kong, that is businessmen in shipping, are connected to Chinese military intelligence, and they're, of course, using Panama like a dirty laundromat in a way.
This is a great interview. If you want to check out the full thing, I'll link it up at the end. But now let's jump over to how many individual crime organizations there are in Canada. The RCMP were asked about this at committee. It's shocking.
To the RCMP, how many people do you estimate are involved in the production and distribution of fentanyl in Canada? You have like a ballpark estimate? Is it 1,000 people? Is it 10,000 people?
I don't have a ballpark figure on it.
So you have no idea how many people could possibly be involved in the fentanyl trade in Canada?
There's a significant group, a significant number of organized crime group, but if you're asking me for a specific number, I can't give you a specific number.
How many organized crime groups are there?
Over 4,000 organized crime groups in Canada, as assessed by the Criminal Intelligence Service Canada.
4,000 individual organized crime groups, all with their own distinct leadership and membership?
That's correct.
That's correct. 4,000 individual crime groups in Canada with their own leadership. We need to have a law in this country. If you're involved in the creation, the transportation, anything to do with street fentanyl, it's 100 years in jail. You get to make fence posts for the rest of your life. That's it. That's your choice. Same thing goes for a lot of these different things. You're stealing cars, 20 years in jail. Home invasion, 25 years in jail. Just start cracking down on this crap. I'm so sick and tired of seeing these stories of goons and gangsters and nothing happens. If a gangster breaks into your house and you defend yourself, looks like you're going to jail. But if the gangster ended you, they wouldn't go to jail because Trudeau's laws want to make sure everyone is happy and safe and healthy, except for Canadians. Just another day in Canada where things just get more and more chaotic. It will get better, though. It will get better. We need to find a way to have unity again, because Trudeau and the Liberals, this is what they want. They want it to split us all up and be bickering at each other and bickering with Americans and dividing us and creating all this frustration, and forget about the real problem here, which is them and what they've done to our country. This is going to be a bumpy ride. I don't think now's the time to kid ourselves, but I think it's important to stay positive. Every day here is just another day, and it's another day closer to getting rid of Justin Trudeau, and eventually we will have our great country of Canada back once again.